I never thought marrying Henry would weave such a tangled thread into my life. 3 years ago, I said, I do, under a wide oak tree in our backyard, the summer sun painting everything gold. Henry's a good man, solid, with calloused hands from years of swinging hammers and hauling lumber. At 56, he's still got that quiet strength I fell for, the kind that makes you feel safe. But with Henry came Lucas, his son from a first marriage that ended long before I entered the picture. Lucas was 19 then, lanky and reserved, with dark hair that always fell into his eyes. Now, at 22, he's a man in his own right, and I'm still figuring out where I fit into this family we've patched together. Henry's job keeps him on the road more than I'd like. Construction projects stretch him across state lines, leaving me alone in our 2-story house on the edge of town. The place smells of pine and old wood, with creaky floors that groan under every step. It's just me and Lucas most days, sharing the space like two strangers who've learned to coexist. At first, it was stiff. Polite nods over breakfast, me asking about his classes at trade school, him mumbling one-word answers. Fine. Good. Yeah. But time has a way of softening edges. Somewhere between fixing the leaky sink together and watching reruns of old westerns, we found a rhythm. He's got a dry wit that catches me off guard, a way of smirking when he teases me about burning the toast. I laugh more than I expect to, and it's easy, maybe too easy. Lucas graduated last month, a certificate in welding tucked into a drawer somewhere. He's at that age where the world feels wide open and suffocating all at once. I see it in the way he lingers at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the overgrown yard, like he's weighing whether to stay or go. Henry says he'll figure it out, that boys like Lucas just need time. But when Henry's gone, it's me who's left to fill the silence. I don't mind it, not really. There's a comfort in the routine, coffee brewing at dawn, the hum of the TV in the evening, the way Lucas kicks off his boots by the door. Still, I catch myself watching him sometimes, noticing how he's changed. The boy I met 3 years ago is gone, replaced by someone taller, broader, with a quiet intensity that wasn't there before. Last night, Henry packed his duffel bag for a week-long job upstate. The truck rumbled out of the driveway before the stars faded, leaving the house to me and Lucas. I found him on the back porch after dinner, the air thick with the scent of cut grass and the faint buzz of cicadas. He was slouched in a wicker chair, a bottle of root beer dangling from his hand, the porch light casting shadows across his face. I stepped outside, barefoot on the warm wood, and settled into the chair beside him. Long day? I asked, tucking my legs under me. He shrugged, the corner of his mouth twitching. Just thinking. About what? I pressed, leaning forward a little. The breeze tugged at my hair, and I brushed it back, waiting. He took a slow sip, the glass clinking against his teeth. What's next, I guess? Moving out, getting a job, all that. His voice was low, steady, but there was a hitch in it, like he wasn't sure he wanted to say more. You've got time, I said, echoing Henry's words. No rush. He nodded, but his eyes stayed on the horizon, where the last sliver of daylight clung to the trees. Maybe. Just feels like I'm stuck sometimes. I tilted my head, studying him. Stuck's not so bad when you've got a roof and a decent meal, right? That got a chuckle out of him, soft and rough. Yeah, you're not wrong. He turned to me then, his gaze catching mine for a beat longer than usual. Something flickered there. Doubt, maybe, or something heavier. It hung between us, unspoken, until he looked away and took another sip. What about you? Happy here? The question caught me off guard. I shifted in my seat, the wicker creaking under me. Happy enough, I said, smiling to keep it light. Henry's good to me. This place, it's home. He nodded again, slower this time, like he was turning my words over in his head. Good, he said finally, almost to himself. Then he stood, stretching his arms overhead, his shirt riding up just enough to show a sliver of tanned skin. Night, Grace. Night, Lucas, I called as he disappeared inside, the screen door slapping shut behind him. I stayed out there a while, the root beer he'd left sweating on the table, the air cooling around me. That look in his eyes stuck with me, though, a quiet question I couldn't answer. It followed me upstairs, lingered as I brushed my teeth, and settled into my chest as I climbed into bed. Henry's side was empty, the sheets cold, and the house felt bigger than it should. Tomorrow, I thought, would be just another day. But something told me it wouldn't be that simple. The morning sun slipped through the bedroom curtains, painting thin stripes across the hardwood floor. I stood in front of the dresser, fresh from the shower. The window cracked open to let in a lazy breeze. It carried the scent of dew and the neighbor's roses, mingling with the dampness still clinging to my skin. My thin robe hugged me, the fabric cool against my thighs, and I ran a brush through my wet hair, watching strands catch the light in the foggy mirror. Last night's talk with Lucas played in my head, his voice, low and uncertain, asking if I was happy. I'd brushed it off, but that flicker in his eyes stayed with me, tugging at something I couldn't place. The floor creaked beyond the door, a sound I'd grown used to in this old house. I paused mid-brush, listening, until his voice came through, soft but clear. "Grace, you in there?" My hand stilled, breath catching. Lucas usually rapped his knuckles hard enough to rattle the frame, especially this early. "Yeah, Lucas," I called back, steadying my tone. "I'm here. Everything okay?" A beat of silence, then, "I need something from the dresser. Can I come in?" His words hung there, simple but heavy somehow. I glanced down at myself, robe tied loose, hair dripping onto my shoulders, and felt a quick twist in my stomach. But his voice was so normal, so everyday that I pushed it aside. "Sure," I said, louder than I meant to. "Come in." The door eased open, and there he was, filling the frame. His faded gray t-shirt stretched across his chest, jeans slung low on his hips, and his dark hair was a mess, like he'd just rolled out of bed. He looked at me, eyes darting from my face to the floor, then back again, before stepping inside. "Morning," he muttered, crossing to the dresser. His boots scuffed the floor, and I caught a whiff of soap and something faintly smoky, maybe from the bonfire he'd mentioned last week. "Morning," I echoed, turning back to the mirror, brushing again like it was nothing. He rummaged through the top drawer, fingers sifting through cords and junk, and I pretended to focus on my reflection. But I felt him there, his presence pulling at the edges of my attention. The breeze lifted the hem of my robe, just a whisper against my skin, and I tugged it tighter without thinking. "You getting ready for something?" he asked, voice low, almost too casual. He didn't look up, still digging, but I saw his shoulders shift, like he was waiting for my answer. "Just starting the day," I said, forcing a smile into my words. "Nothing special." I met his gaze in the mirror for a second, those hazel eyes sharp and searching, before he ducked his head again. The air thickened, the hum of the world outside fading under the weight of us in this room. He pulled out a tangled charger, holding it up like a prize. "Found it." But he didn't move. Instead, he leaned against the bedpost, one hand gripping the wood, the other clutching the cord. His shirt pulled taut across his back, and I noticed the way his jaw tightened, like he was chewing on something he wouldn't say. "Grace," he started, then stopped, running his tongue over his lips. "I've been feeling off lately. Have you noticed anything different about me?" I turned to face him, brush slipping from my hand to the dresser with a soft clatter. The robe slipped too, just an inch, bearing a sliver of collarbone, and I caught it quick, holding it closed. "What do you mean?" I asked, quieter than I meant to. My pulse kicked up, a steady thrum in my ears. He straightened, taking a step closer, the charger forgotten in his fist. "I don't know how to say it." His eyes locked on mine, deep and unreadable, like a storm rolling in slow. "Something's changed. I feel it, and I'm wondering if you do too." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The space between us shrank, his boots brushing the edge of the rug now, close enough I could see the stubble shadowing his jaw. "Lucas?" I managed, my voice a thread. "Clarify it for me. What's changed?" He hesitated, gaze dropping to my hands, still clutching the robe, then back up. I can't put it right, he said, stepping nearer again. It's like I'm seeing you different, and I don't know what to do with that. His breath hitched, and I felt mine catch too, the room shrinking to just us, the breeze gone still. My heart hammered, loud enough I swore he'd hear it. Lucas, I said again, firmer this time, but he was closer now, his shadow falling over me. His hand twitched like he might reach out, and I didn't move, couldn't. The air was thick, heavy with something I didn't want to name, something that felt wrong and right all at once. He was Henry's son, my stepson, standing there in my bedroom, and yet here I was, rooted, waiting for what came next. I stood there, frozen, the brush still warm against the dresser where it had fallen. Lucas's words hung in the air. I'm seeing you different. And my chest tightened, a knot I couldn't untangle. He was so close now, his boots scuffing the rug, his breath a faint rhythm I could almost feel. Henry's son, I told myself, the thought sharp like a slap. But then his hand moved, slow and careful, brushing against mine. Just the tips of his fingers, rough from work, grazing my knuckles. A shiver shot through me, quick and electric, and I pulled back, stepping toward the window like I needed the air. Lucas, we can't, I said, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. This isn't right. The words tasted bitter, forced out past the lump in my throat. He nodded, fast and jerky, his eyes dropping to the floor. I know, he whispered, voice thick with something heavy. I know it's wrong, Grace, but I can't stop feeling it. His hand flexed, still holding that damn charger. And then he took a step back too, like he was trying to undo the moment. I'm sorry, he muttered, barely audible, before turning and slipping out the door. It clicked shut behind him, soft but final, leaving me alone with the hum of my own heartbeat. I pressed my back against the wall, the cool plaster grounding me as I stared at the empty space where he'd stood. My robe felt too thin, the damp hair sticking to my neck too cold. What just happened? I replayed it, his touch, his words, the way his eyes had held mine like he was searching for something I didn't know I had. It was wrong, all of it, but my skin still buzzed where his fingers had been. I shook my head, hard, and grabbed the brush again, yanking it through my hair until it hurt. I needed to move, to do something, anything, to shake this off. The day stretched out like a chore I didn't want to face. I threw myself into the mundane, folding laundry in the living room, the dryer's heat seeping into my hands, hauling groceries from the car, bags crinkling as I set them on the counter. I scrubbed the kitchen sink until my knuckles stung, the sponge leaving faint red marks. Every task was a wall I built between me and that morning, but it didn't work. Lucas's voice kept creeping in, low and rough. I can't stop feeling it. I saw his face, too, the way his jaw had tightened, the shadow of stubble catching the light. I turned the radio on, some old country tune crackling through, but it couldn't drown him out. By dusk, the house felt too big, too quiet. Henry's absence was a void, and Lucas, wherever he'd gone after leaving my room, left his own kind of emptiness. I poured a glass of bourbon, the amber liquid glinting in the kitchen light, and carried it to the couch. The first sip burned, sharp and steadying, and I sank into the cushions, staring at the ceiling. The porch talk last night, the bedroom this morning, it all swirled together, a mess I couldn't untangle. I took another sip, the warmth spreading, and told myself it was nothing. A fluke, a kid confused about his feelings, but deep down I knew better. The front door creaked open, and my glass nearly slipped from my hand. I sat up, heart thudding, as Lucas stepped inside. His boots were muddy, his t-shirt wrinkled, and his hair fell over his eyes like it always did when he'd been out too long. He stopped when he saw me, hands shoved deep in his pockets, and the silence stretched tight between us. Hey, he said, soft and unsure, like he was testing the water. Hey, I replied, my voice wobbling despite the bourbon. I set the glass on the coffee table, the clink loud in the stillness, and watched him hover near the doorway. He didn't come closer, just stood there, looking at me with those same searching eyes from the bedroom. "Been out," he said, kicking at the floor. "Needed to clear my head." I nodded, slow, my fingers curling into the couch. "Me too," I admitted, though I hadn't left the house. He took a step forward then, just one, and I saw the way his shoulders slumped, like he was carrying something too heavy to hold. "Couldn't stop thinking about earlier," he said, voice dropping low again. "I didn't mean to. I don't know, Grace. I just—" He cut off, rubbing the back of his neck, and I felt my breath hitch. "Lucas," I started, standing up, the bourbon buzzing in my veins. "We need to forget it. It's done." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I meant it. He looked at me, really looked, and the room felt smaller, the air thicker. He didn't argue, didn't push, just nodded once, sharp, and turned toward the stairs. I watched him go, his footsteps fading, and sank back onto the couch, the glass cold against my palm. Forgetting wasn't going to be that easy. The bourbon sat untouched on the coffee table, its amber glow dimming as the living room darkened. Lucas's footsteps had faded up the stairs, but his words, "couldn't stop thinking about earlier," clung to me like damp air after a storm. I pressed my hands into the couch cushions, feeling the rough weave under my palms, and stared at the ceiling. The house creaked around me, settling into the night, but my mind wouldn't settle. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing there, hands in his pockets, that quiet intensity in his gaze. I told myself to let it go, to bury it deep, but my pulse wouldn't slow, and my skin still remembered his touch from the bedroom. The clock ticked past 9, the sound sharp in the stillness. I stood, restless, and paced to the window, peering out at the yard bathed in moonlight. The grass shimmered with dew, and the old oak loomed like a shadow against the sky. I didn't hear him come back down until his voice broke the quiet. "Grace?" I turned fast, and there he was, leaning against the doorway, his t-shirt swapped for a black sweatshirt, sleeves pushed up to his elbows. His hair was damp, like he'd splashed water on his face, and his eyes locked on mine, steady and unguarded. "Couldn't sleep," he said, stepping into the room. His boots were off, socks whispering against the floor, and he stopped a few feet away, hands flexing at his sides. "I need to say something." I crossed my arms, the thin sweater I'd thrown on feeling flimsy against the weight of his stare. "Lucas, we talked about this," I said. But my voice wavered, betraying me. He shook his head, slow, and took another step closer, the space between us shrinking again. "No, we didn't. Not really." He swallowed, his throat bobbing, and leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, as he sat on the arm of the chair across from me. "I don't know how to say this right, Grace, but you mean more to me than you should. More than I can handle." His words hit like a punch, soft but deep, and I felt my breath catch, sharp in my chest. I wanted to stop him, to tell him to take it back, but my tongue stuck. "Lucas," I whispered, barely audible, and he looked up, eyes dark and raw. "I feel it too," I said, the confession slipping out before I could catch it. It hung there, heavy and real, and his face shifted. Surprise, then something softer, like relief. He stood, slow, and crossed the last few steps to the couch, sitting beside me. His knee brushed mine, a fleeting heat, and then his hand found mine, fingers curling warm and firm around my own. For a moment, we just sat there, hands clasped, the silence thick with everything we weren't saying. His thumb traced a slow line across my knuckles, and I watched it, mesmerized, my heart thudding loud enough to drown out the clock. Then he turned, his free hand lifting to my cheek, hesitant, like he was asking permission. I didn't pull away. I leaned in instead, my lips brushing his. Soft, tentative, a question answered. His breath hitched, and he kissed me back. Gentle but sure, his hand sliding to the nape of my neck. It was warm, alive, and it lit something deep inside me, a spark I hadn't felt in years. We pulled apart, foreheads touching, both of us trembling. His breath fanned across my face, quick and uneven, and he whispered, "What are we doing?" I didn't have an answer, just pressed my hand to his chest, feeling the steady thump beneath his sweatshirt. "I don't know," I murmured, my voice shaky but honest. "But it's real." He nodded, a small, tight motion, and his grip on my hand tightened, like he was afraid I'd slip away. "We don't have to figure it all out tonight," he said, soft, his thumb brushing my cheek now. "But we can't pretend it's not there, Grace. Not anymore." I looked into his eyes, hazel flecked with gold, wide with a mix of fear and want, and knew he was right. The pretending was over. I squeezed his hand back, the connection grounding me, and managed a small smile. "Together, then," I said, barely above a whisper. "We'll face it together." The next few days, with Henry still gone, shifted something between us. We didn't talk about the kiss again. Not outright, but it lived in the quiet moments. The way he'd linger over coffee in the morning, his shoulder brushing mine as we washed dishes side by side. One evening, we sat in the backyard, the air cooling as the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the grass. He stretched out beside me on the old blanket, our elbows touching, and I felt that spark again, steady and warm. "This okay?" he asked, voice low, glancing at me sidelong. I nodded, resting my head back, the stars just starting to peek through. "Yeah," I said. "It's okay." And for the first time since that morning in the bedroom, I believed it might be. Henry's truck rumbled into the driveway just after dawn, the sound jolting me awake. I'd barely slept, tangled in sheets that felt too warm, my mind replaying the backyard. Lucas's elbow brushing mine, the stars overhead, that quiet, "It's okay," still echoing. I slipped out of bed, tugging on a cardigan over my nightshirt, and padded downstairs. The front door swung open, and there he was, Henry, all broad shoulders and dust-streaked jeans, grinning like he hadn't been gone a week. "Missed you, Gracie," he said, dropping his duffel bag and pulling me into a hug. His arms were solid, familiar, and I pressed my cheek to his chest, breathing in sawdust and sweat, forcing a smile. "Missed you too," I murmured, my voice steady despite the churn in my gut. Lucas appeared at the top of the stairs, hair tousled, hands shoved in his sweatshirt pockets. "Hey, Dad," he called, voice flat, and Henry waved up at him, oblivious to the tension coiling between us. Breakfast was a blur. Henry's loud laugh filling the kitchen, pancakes sizzling on the griddle, me flipping them while Lucas poured coffee, his fingers brushing mine when he handed me a mug. Our eyes met, quick and sharp, then darted away. Every move felt like a performance, a script we hadn't rehearsed, and I kept my hands busy, wiping counters, refilling Henry's plate. Anything to avoid the weight of Lucas's gaze. That night, Henry clapped his hands together after dinner, his voice booming. "Let's sit, catch up, family time." I nodded, heart thudding, and followed him to the living room. He sprawled on the recliner, still talking about the job, some bridge project, delays with concrete, while I sank onto the couch, legs tucked under me. Lucas took the chair across the room, elbows on his knees, staring at his hands like they held answers. Henry's stories washed over us, a steady drone, but I couldn't focus. Lucas glanced up once, our eyes locking for a split second, and I felt it, the secret we carried, pulsing in the space between us. Henry didn't notice, laughing at his own joke, and I forced a chuckle, my throat tight. Later, after Henry shuffled off to bed, I found Lucas in the kitchen. The house was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the faint tick of the clock. He stood by the sink rinsing a glass, his back to me. The moonlight slanted through the window, catching the lines of his shoulders, and I stopped in the doorway, arms crossed. "We can't keep this up," I said, voice low but firm, breaking the silence. He turned, slow, setting the glass down with a soft clink. Water dripped from his hands, pooling on the counter, and he wiped them on his jeans, eyes meeting mine. Dark, heavy with something I recognized too well. "I know," he said, stepping closer, his socks silent on the tile. "He deserves better than us sneaking around behind him." His jaw tightened, and he leaned against the counter, arms folding over his chest. "But I don't know how to stop this, Grace. I don't want to." I took a breath, sharp and shaky, and moved to the table, sinking into a chair. "I love you, Lucas," I said, the words slipping out raw and unpolished. His eyes widened, a flash of surprise, then softened, and he crossed the room, kneeling in front of me. "I love you too," he whispered, voice rough, his hand reaching for mine. His fingers were warm, steady, and I gripped them tight, feeling the truth settle between us, real, undeniable, and terrifying. "But Henry," I started, my voice cracking. "He's your father, my husband. If he finds out—" I couldn't finish, the thought too heavy. Lucas nodded, slow, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "I don't want to hurt him either," he said. "But pretending nothing's changed? That's killing me." I pulled my hand back, standing, the chair scraping against the floor. "We need space," I said, resolute despite the ache in my chest. "To figure this out, really figure it out, without this." I gestured between us, the air thick with what we'd done, what we still wanted. His face fell, shadows deepening under his eyes, but he stood too, nodding once. "If that's what you think's best," he said, voice quiet, pained. "I'll give you that." The next morning, Henry left for work again, a quick kiss on my cheek before his truck roared off. Lucas stayed upstairs, the house silent, until I heard him moving, his steps heavy on the stairs. We met in the kitchen again, the table between us like a line we couldn't cross. "I've been thinking," he said, leaning on the counter, coffee mug in hand. "You're right, space might help." I nodded, gripping my own mug, the heat biting my palms. "It's not forever," I said, soft. "Just until we know what this means." He looked at me, a small, sad smile tugging at his lips, and I felt it, a bond still there, stretched thin but unbroken. Whatever came next, we'd face it. But for now, we stepped back, letting the quiet settle in.